socially.
Scum!
Now, I've met some divorce lawyers, and I've always loved the Beatles. I've loved the Beatles. The first album I ever got into was Sgt. Pepper's. Back there, that's when he was a sergeant. He came out of the army, became a doctor. You know what happened. But no, when I was, I've got bird flu. Come on. Anyway, when Sgt. Pepper, Dr. Pepper. It's the fever. I'm sorry. Anyway, when I was just a kid when I got into that album, you know, the Sgt. Pepper, Dr. Pepper album. No, the Sergeant, I was just a kid. I was only 7 when it came out, and I loved it. I was doing a lot of acid back then when I was 7, yeah. And people would buy albums then, that album and other albums, to play them backwards and hear the hidden messages. You can't do that now in the digital age. You know, you do that with your iPod, it just, nothing happens. But the subliminal messages on the albums back then used to be satanic. It was like, ah, but now the bands are just satanic right in your face. They just come out and go, ah, Satan, right in your face. So the messages would be, if you could get backwards messages, they'd be different. It'd be like, sit up straight. You'd have to go there, use a coaster. Cover your mouth when you cough. Now listen, the first ex-Mrs. Ferguson, stay with me, the first ex-Mrs. Ferguson comes from a town called Campbelltown in Scotland. It's in a place called the Mull Kintyre. See what I'm talking, see where I'm going here? Mull Kintyre. It's a big area in Scotland, a big rural area where Paul had a sheep farm. And, you know, he's a militant vegetarian, Paul McCartney, so the sheep were not meant to be killed, right? They wouldn't let them kill the sheep, you know, they had to die a natural death. But the farmhands, I would meet the farmhands and the shepherds in the local pub. And they say they would eat the sheep sometimes. That's what they do, you know, they're shepherds. And then they would say to Paul McCartney, oh, Mr. McCartney, another sheep fell off a cliff again. He passed away quietly in the field. Paul McCartney must think he owned the clumsiest and most suicidal sheep in Scotland. I have been to Liverpool, the Beatles' hometown, right? I'm a Beatles fan, and everyone of a certain age in Liverpool claims they have a connection with the Beatles. You know, if you meet a cab driver and say, oh, yeah, I was the 18th Beatle. You know, you got a plumber who says, yeah, I was the 484th Beatle. I think Pete Best, the original drummer in the Beatles, the first drummer, who was replaced by Ringo, you know, he's known as the 5th Beatle. I think he still lives in Liverpool. I don't know. It must be tough to be the guy that used to be in the Beatles before they were successful. You know, wake up every morning and go, oh, I wonder what I'm going to... Oh, no! I'll just brush my... Oh, God! Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Oh, I wonder if... Oh! I know what that's like. I was the 5th Golden Girl. I know what it's like. Now, the Beatles are still hugely popular. I mean, there's tribute bands all over the place for the Beatles. There's a band called Beatlemania, pretty good. The Fab Four, another one. Oasis, they're another one. The tribute bands have tribute bands. People love collecting the Beatles memorabilia. Actually, if you think about it, overnight, Heather Mills has become the world's biggest collector of Beatles memorabilia, hasn't she? Money was once owned by Paul McCartney. Come on, she deserves it. She deserves it. He'd be nothing without her. She deserves it. He's going to take a financial hit, is what I'm saying. But he won't be clipping coupons. He'll be all right. He might be asking for a senior discount. This is not what he had in mind when he was turning 64. I tell you why I'm worried about this. If he loses half of his money, he might get desperate. And then he might reunite his other band, Wings. Nobody wants that. Now, people were mad at Yoko Ono for supposedly splitting up the Beatles. Can you imagine how mad people will be at Heather Mills if Wings gets back together because of her? They're going to split it down. They'll have to split the estate down the middle. You know, she'll get half of his songs, you know, and he'll get the other half. She'll get Hey, he gets Jude. She'll get na na na, he'll get na 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 na. That'll be it. Actually, the person that owns the Beatles catalogue is Michael Jackson, right? And he's in the Middle East. I think trying to sell Beatles songs to Al-Qaeda to raise money. We don't want them falling into Al-Qaeda's hand. They'll change the lyrics to suit their own ends. In the town that I was born, in Yemen, lived a man who was an infidel.
Worldwide Panic.